With the NFL draft over and dynasty values shaken up all over the place, it is time to run through our dynasty rankings once again. So now we're up to our top 70 overall wide receiver dynasty rankings. So at the top, we have a very long list of elite alpha wide receivers. This might honestly be the best time to ever build your dynasty team around wide receivers because there are just so many amazing players in the NFL right now. I did split tier 1 into a more A and B tier though, as I have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase in tier 1A, then CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr., and Nico Collins in tier 1B. These players are the building blocks of your dynasty teams, whether you're in Superflex or one quarterback. These are the players that when I talk about trading up for, doing 2-for-1s and 3-for-1s to just get studs, these are the guys. And I fully believe that you need at least one of them to win a fantasy championship. If you're able to have 2, even better. 3, and you've built yourself a perennial winner, a true dynasty roster that can even win without the strongest quarterbacks or running backs or even the best tight end. And the order of this tier doesn't really matter to me. The reason why Jefferson and Chase are viewed as slightly higher is just because, well, it's Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. They're just different, man. The confidence that you have when you are starting either one, let alone if you somehow have both. I mean, what an absolute feeling for fantasy football. Then the other 6 are all tremendous in their own right. Again, I have no issues on your order versus mine versus somebody else's. Literally do not care. I just want whoever I can get because all of these guys are going to be elite for probably the next 4 or 5 more years. Now, tier 2 is just 2 players and I think could also be deserving of a tier 1 rank, but something feels like it's holding them back that isn't even really necessarily their fault, and it's AJ Brown and Drake London. Now, AJ Brown's story, it's very simpler. AJ Brown's story is very simple. He's 27, about to be 28 in June, and that is the only reason he's not in tier 1. He is effectively 2 or more years older than everybody in tier 1. If he was turning 26 instead of 28 in a couple of months, I'd have him in the top 5, but just because of his age, he's down here at wide receiver 9. I have no issues about his production. He was a back-to-back 1,400-yard guy in 2022 and 2023, and then still put up almost 1,100 yards in 2024 despite missing 4 games, which is a 17-game pace of over 1,400 yards again. So pretty much 3 straight 1,400-yard seasons in Philadelphia, and there's not one single reason why that would stop. He's a monster, he's an alpha, he's a true wide receiver animal, and he might be the best buy in all of Dynasty for anyone trying to compete in 2024 because his Dynasty value has been sliding all offseason for no reason whatsoever other than he's about to be 28 years old. Then as for Drake London, who is entering the prime of his career by turning 24 in July, he is fresh off of a breakout season that we've been waiting for with almost 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. What feels like is holding Drake London back is really just ultimate elite level ceiling. I really don't know if London has the single season upside to be a top 5 or even top 3 fantasy receiver with 120 plus receptions, 1,500 plus yards, double-digit touchdowns. Everybody else above him has already done that or very easily see them doing that very soon, but I don't know if Drake London has that in him because he's not the type of insane athlete that the guys ahead of him are. And you might say, well, Addison, London was actually the wide receiver 5 in fantasy last year. How can you say that he doesn't have that ceiling when he literally just did it? And my answer to that would be, yes, on a total points basis, he was the wide receiver 5, but in points per game, he was wide receiver 14, behind every wide receiver that I ranked ahead of him, plus a couple of older guys that we'll get to later in the video. He had an excellent season with 16.5 PPR points per game, but that is not game-breaking production. That is not pummel your opponent into submission type of production. Last year, only 7 wide receivers averaged over 18 PPR points per game. In 2023, that number was 4. 2022, 4 again. In order for London to get to 18 points per game, he would need to repeat his 2024 season again, while adding 6 receptions, 130 yards, and 1 touchdown. So effectively, getting to a stat line of 105 receptions for over 1,400 yards and double-digit touchdowns over 17 games. I don't think that that's impossible or out of his range of outcomes, but that's still a fair increase on what he did in 2024, assuming that Michael Penix continues to grow, even with Bijan being an absolute bell cow. Darnell Mooney is a very good second option. I don't know if London has a monster season outcome versus just regular top 12 outcomes that are very, very good. Again, don't hear what I'm not saying though. I love Drake London. I am very bought into him as a player and a Dynasty asset, which is why he's very easily a top 10 Dynasty wide receiver and tier 2 player that is closer to tier 1 than he is tier 3. I'm just trying to explain why he's not actually in my tier 1 because I just don't know if he has that elite ultra upside ceiling that everybody above him possesses. Tier 3 then is a really fun tier of more young guys who all could break into the top 10 over the next year or two just with their own personal production, but especially as some of the top 10 kind of start to age out here over the next couple of years. So for me, it goes Jackson Smith-Njigba, Ladd McConkey, Travis Hunter, and Tet McMillan. And then I do have a tier 3B that goes Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, and Rashee Rice. So that is all technically tier 3. I just kind of also have it broken up into a more A and B tier within the tier itself. Now, the reason I have this tier split is really just coming down to overall confidence in the two groups of players. JSN and Ladd McConkey, I really have no issues with whatsoever. Sure, I don't love Sam Darnold at quarterback, but if he's even remotely fixed at all from being in Minnesota to now being in a Kubiak offense with JSN as their no doubt wide receiver 1, I really don't have any issues, especially after what I saw over the second half of last year for Jackson Smith-Njigba. Ladd McConkey is pretty much the same way. Yes, they added Trey Harris in the second round of the draft, which they definitely needed to, but McConkey is still the wide receiver 1 for Justin Herbert and should just keep building on their success from the end of last year. And that's even assuming that Trey Harris even does translate to the NFL. If he's just an average wide receiver or even worse, then that could mean even more targets going back to Ladd McConkey. Then for the rookies, there's really nothing I can point to for NFL production other than just my personal faith in both players in both of their situations. Hunter is in a fantastic spot as the wide receiver 1B with Brian Thomas Jr. The Jaguars paid an extraordinary amount to go up and get him at second overall, so he should be an impact player immediately in year 1. Very similarly is Tet McMillan, who Carolina didn't have to trade up for, but they still took top 10 to be that missing piece that they've needed on offense for Bryce Young to continue developing as well. I honestly wouldn't be shocked at all if both rookies were top 15 wide receivers this year in 2025 and then gained even more value heading into 2026. So then this second group of guys, again, we've seen how it goes right for them, and I do have confidence in them. They have all the talent in the world to capitalize on their opportunity, but there just seems like there's a hurdle or something in the way for all three of them right now. Rashee Rice, very obviously the easy one. It's injury, it's legal issues, it's now probably the depth chart. Before he got hurt, he was the easy wide receiver 1 for Kansas City at the end of 2023 and into the beginning of 2024. But with Xavier Worthy having a small breakout to end the year, and Hollywood Brown is also back on a 1-year contract, plus the addition of Jalen Royals on day 3, does Rashee Rice have the wide receiver 1 role still, or is he more of the wide receiver 2, or even maybe in a wide receiver committee, kind of like the Green Bay Packers? Is he even fully healthy coming off of the knee injury from last year? And if he doesn't have a great year, then it's 2026. He's entering the final year of his rookie contract with flashes of potential, but injury held him back. We get a suspension probably in 2026 as well. I mean, I still believe that Rashee Rice is a very good player. I believe in the talent. I believe that he is the wide receiver 1 when he returns, but there is no denying that he is on much thinner ice to maintain this value heading into next season, and I have no issues if people are kind of against Rashee Rice at this top 15 kind of valuation for him. Then we get to Garrett Wilson, who is in a make or break kind of season for his dynasty value as well, because if he has another solid but not great fantasy season this year, his value might honestly fall outside the top 20, because then it would be 4 seasons of the same production, and we just have to believe that that is kind of all he is for fantasy football. I don't believe in Justin Fields to be the one to give him the massive breakout that we all want. I don't care that they were teammates at Ohio State. I don't care if Fields was the one that unlocked DJ Moore. DJ Moore is quite literally the only wide receiver that Justin Fields has ever supported for over 10 fantasy points per game. He's the only one. I'm not even convinced that Justin Fields even finishes the season as the Jets starter this year, let alone is also the guy heading into 2026. So we might have even more quarterback issues for Garrett Wilson after Justin Fields. Wilson's still very young. He's still obviously extremely talented, but so are like 10 other guys in Dynasty after him with not so different production. So it is still kind of hard to keep putting Garrett Wilson up here if we're not getting breakout difference-making production that we've been hoping for the past few years. Then Marvin Harrison Jr., I mean, we know the deal here. We're just waiting for the breakout that should inevitably come as the wide receiver 1 for Kyler Murray. My fear is that it does not come this year in 2025, and I do have a little bit of data to support that. At the end of last season, I tweeted out the list of top 10 overall drafted wide receivers since 2000 who failed to hit 900 yards as a rookie. It's only 7 guys prior to last year, one of whom was Justin Blackmon, who I just kind of throw out of the list because of all the issues. He was on pace. It started out his year 2 with 4 straight 100-yard games, but all the extracurricular stuff issues, I just kind of threw him off the list. But of the other 6 wide receivers, every single one of them did have a breakout season between years 2 through 4. But at the time when I tweeted that out, there was really no signal as to why some of them broke out in year 2 versus year 3 versus that year 4 until I dug into their coaching situations. The 2 wide receivers out of the 6 who broke out in year 2 had an offensive coordinator change from year 1 to year 2, leading into a new offensive system, and thus their year 2 breakout. The 3 wide receivers who broke out in year 3, meaning that their year 2 wasn't much different than their year 1, those teams did not change their head coach or offensive coordinator in year 2, but then did so in year 3. So they were under the same offense in year 2 as year 1. Their production didn't change, but then with that offensive change entering year 3, then the breakout happened. Then the 1 wide receiver who broke out in year 4, he did have the same head coach and offensive coordinator in year 2, so he did not have that year 2 breakout. Then he got different coaches in year 3 that stayed in year 4, which was then his breakout. So it was very weird that he did require that coaching change, but he didn't break out into year 2 of that second coaching system. But overall, the pattern is there. Every single top 10 drafted wide receiver who failed to hit 900 yards as a rookie did not break out until there was a new offense under a new offensive coordinator for that team. The Cardinals did not change their coaching staff at all. So Drew Petzing is still their offensive coordinator under Jonathan Gannon, and it's the same offense as it was last year for Marvin Harrison's disappointing rookie season. So assuming that the pattern continues, we probably shouldn't expect a Marvin Harrison breakout in 2025, but instead in 2026, if/when the Arizona Cardinals do change their coaching staffs. Like I said, I am confident that the breakout will happen for Marvin Harrison, but I fear that it's just not this year. With that said, I don't think his dynasty value is going to fall if he doesn't have a breakout this year, because then the expectation will be that it happens next year. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is a very insulated asset, just like how Garrett Wilson has been throughout his career, how Drake London has been up to last year's breakout. So I wouldn't expect you to be able to buy him at any real discount next year, unless maybe you're in season and the manager is competing and just wants better production instead. That's the only way that I could possibly see someone selling Marvin Harrison low for the next year or 2. Tier 4, though, is very easy. It's just T. Higgins. I didn't want to put him any lower than this because he is and can continue to be very productive as the wide receiver 1B really for Joe Burrow, but I didn't want to put him any higher because he's older than everybody besides A.J. Brown. He has these health concerns still, and even though on paper he signed a 4-year deal, it is technically a very fancy and well-constructed 2-year deal that rewards him for playing, rewards him for producing, but if he doesn't do those things, he won't get all of that money, and he could be cut in 2 years at the age of 28. So here he is, all alone in tier 4 as basically the bridge between the great to elite young guys and the more average but could also have upside young guys, because Higgins is kind of young but also not really, and he is kind of great for production but also not really. So he's just kind of here as that bridge. Now, tier 5 is just 3 very young players who all have the upside to reach tier 3 or higher as soon as this season, but they do each have a hurdle to get over before that value rise happens. Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze, and Emeka Egbuka. Worthy just needs to continue showing that he is the wide receiver 1 for Pat Mahomes, even with Rashee Rice back. He very well can, even though that I'm still betting on Rashee Rice, but Worthy is a really good asset to hang on to right now, especially if the Kansas City Chiefs do get back to throwing 600 plus times and throwing deep consistently. Even if Worthy isn't the wide receiver one in terms of targets at the end of the year, he could still be extremely valuable as the more wide receiver 2 or even 1B, especially if Mahomes is let loose again. Rome Odunze, very similar story to Marvin Harrison. We're just waiting on that breakout, which actually, if you follow the pattern that I laid out for Marvin Harrison Jr. as to why he might not break out this year, that pattern actually works in Odunze's favor, as he was also a top 10 overall pick that failed to reach 900 yards as a rookie, but he is in a new offense this year, which very easily could lead to his year 2 breakout. The only thing that muddies that clear vision of a breakout this year versus just even a month ago are the additions of Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. There are now a ton of mouths to feed in Chicago, and it's not as clear that Odunze is going to get the targets needed to break out this year. If he doesn't, I don't think that he's going to lose a ton of value, but we'll just have to kind of see where he is in that offense next year. But if he does break out in this offense with everybody around him, he's going to skyrocket into the top 15, maybe even top 12 easily if he does establish himself as Caleb's 1A, 1B, and has a great fantasy season. And then I threw Ibuka in here because even though 2025 doesn't really look great, the situation could open up tremendously in 2026. Mike Evans is a free agent, and I honestly wouldn't be shocked if he retired at the end of the year as well. Yes, Chris Godwin signed a 3-year deal, which is really more like a 2-year deal, but he's going to be 29 years old this year, coming off of another pretty major injury. Who knows how effective he'll be this year or even next? All I'm saying is I'm trusting the talent of Ibuka in a fantastic offense as a first-round wide receiver to get plenty of opportunities for fantasy in as early as this year, even if Godwin is slow to return. With Mike Evans aging, he also missed a couple games with injury last year, so Ibuka could outperform expectations this year and then have an even bigger opening next year for even better fantasy production. All right, Tier 6 is now 11 players long, and I'm not going to deep dive into any of them specifically because they're all pretty much the same. They're either wide receiver 1s in more low-volume offenses or they're wide receiver 2s in above average to even good offenses. I didn't even really put all that much effort into the actual order of this list either because they're all really just the same player. But here goes the actual order. It's Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, Jordan Addison, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Jameson Williams, George Pickens, and Brandon Ayuk. And yes, before anyone asks, I am fully aware of the Pickens trade at the time that I'm recording this, so these rankings reflect the values of George Pickens in Dallas and DK Metcalf alone as the wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh. Now, I'm going to be very blunt when I say this, but this is 100% how I feel. This tier of wide receivers are the worst wide receivers to roster in Dynasty. They are 100% the worst, and I would actively be trading every single one of them if you have them. The reason that I say that is because none of these guys really matter for fantasy football. Every year, they will be in that same nebulous of receivers that's like 20 players deep, where they all score within like a point of each other. Perfect example, last year, the point per game difference between the wide receiver 2 and the wide receiver 12 is the same as the point per game difference between wide receiver 19 and wide receiver 40. And 9 of the 11 wide receivers in this tier were outside the top 24 last year in points per game. The only 2 who were in the top 24 were Terry McLaurin and Devonta Smith, who were in the top 24, but outside the top 15. The other issue with this tier is that because so many produce outside the top 24, that means that they are not significantly different than a bunch of wide receivers that I have ranked behind them, or are, of course, outproduced by the older but also productive veterans like Mike Evans, like Devontae Adams, maybe even Tyreek Hill if the Dolphins improve this year. The point is that you are paying really just for name value of these guys and for the hope of upside, when realistically, these guys haven't shown any type of consistency outside of maybe one season for a couple of these guys. Like last year was the one Terry McLaurin season. 2023 was the one DJ Moore season. I'm sure maybe if we look back in 5 years, we'll say maybe we had that one Zay Flowers season or that one Chris Olave season. But I don't think anyone in this tier is going to significantly contribute to you winning a Dynasty championship. This is precisely the tier that I want to upgrade from to get to tier 1 or tier 2. I want to send 2 2 or even 3 of these wide receivers for one tier 1 alpha, because then you get an actual difference maker in your lineup every week. You probably then have fewer lineup decisions. If you're constantly debating who to start between 3 guys who are all pretty much the same, then you kick yourself when you make the wrong decision. And it's just as easy to find someone to replace your depth or that other starter, because there are always 10 to 15 other guys who will produce the exact same way, but they are cheaper to get than these wide receivers. So that is what I mean when I say that this tier of wide receivers are the worst receivers to roster in Dynasty. And as I said, I would be actively trading any of them or multiples of them for just better players. Tier 7 is then the mirror image of Tier 6. It's another 11 receivers who are all cheaper than guys in Tier 6, but they're all going to produce either similarly or even outproduce pretty much everyone in Tier 6. It's Khalil Shakir, Trey Harris, Jaden Higgins, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Jaden Reed, Josh Downs, Juwan Jennings, Ricky Purcell, Jerry Jeudy, and Darnell Mooney. Fun fact for you, Darnell Mooney averaged more fantasy points per game last year than George Pickens. Josh Downs averaged more points per game than Zay Flowers. Jerry Jeudy averaged the same points per game as Jordan Addison. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that you're paying a nonsense premium for everyone in Tier 6, when guys in Tier 7 are all doing the same thing but come with a way cheaper price tag. It's like buying the brand name Advil when the generic one is right next to it for way cheaper and does the exact same thing. And some of these guys even have upside to get up into Tiers 3 or Tier 4, like all of the rookies in here. If they hit in their situations, they would be worth so much more than anyone in Tier 6. From a value and a roster construction standpoint, it just makes so much more sense to take shots on these guys than guys above them in Tier 6. Getting into Tier 8 now is just grouping all of the old guys. It's Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, Tyreek Hill, Calvin Ridley, Courtland Sutton, and Stephon Diggs. I talked about this in the running back rankings video a little bit, but this tier is where the nuances of dynasty value really come into play, because it's not to say that I would 100% prefer Darnell Mooney over Mike Evans on every single team. It is very team and direction based for the 2025 season. If you are competing, I would probably throw this entire tier just up above Tier 7, because I feel way more confident in the production that I should be getting from the old guys versus those young guys who most likely aren't the top targets in their offense. But Mike Evans is the top target. Devontae Adams, I mean, he might be a top target-ish. Tyreek's the top target. Calvin Ridley's the top target. Courtland Sutton's the top target. Stephon Diggs might be the top target this year. Their ceilings are also a lot higher than, because of them being the wide receiver ones for their teams. It's just, given the fact of their age, it's a really slippery slope for Dynasty, because if we even get a whiff of a lost step or a drop of usage or a drop in roll, anything, their value tanks. I mean, just look at DeAndre Hopkins from 2023 to 2024. Dude dropped like a freaking rock because the only thing holding up his value is production. And without that, he's toast. So that's where the direction of your team is very important. If you're rebuilding, I would prefer guys in Tier 6 and Tier 7. But if you're competing, I'm either keeping these old guys or trying to find a way to tier down to them and get a little extra on top for their production from the guys in Tier 6 and 7. Tier 9 then are the 5 wide receivers that are also old to older that I have less confidence in their production for 2025. And honestly, I think you're hoping that these guys just aren't toast already. It's Jacoby Myers, Michael Pittman, Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, and Hollywood Brown. I don't really know what to do with these guys if you have them on your team. You're probably already stuck with them until the season, and then hopefully they produce well enough to actually use in your lineup or to actually sell just to get out from under them. Again, if you're rebuilding, I probably prefer guys that I have in Tier 10 over these 5 in Tier 9, but if you are competing, I think you try to upgrade to Tier 7 or 8, but you'll probably also have a hard time doing that without severely overpaying. So like I said, I think you're just kind of stuck if you have these guys for another couple months. And then Tier 10 takes us to my wide receiver 70 and maybe even beyond. This tier is pretty much all 25 and under with a much more long-term outlook on situation or production, where we need things to change slightly in their favor or just actually see them play before we can raise their value any higher than this. So it's Jalen Knoll, Jack Besh, Keon Coleman, Alec Ayometer, Jalen McMillan, Tank Dell, Cedric Tillman, Rashid Shaheed, Rashad Bateman, Xavier Legette, Pat Bryant, Roman Wilson, Dontavian Wicks, Adonai Mitchell, and Torrey Horton. I had to throw Torrey Horton in there at the end. Again, order doesn't really matter here to me. If you prefer some guys over others, totally fine by me. Basically, this tier is just your depth with upside. So grab whoever you want to round out the end of your bench and then just hopefully see who ends up hitting for you or not. So there we have it, my current top 70 Dynasty wide receiver rankings as we head into the summer post NFL draft. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for Dynasty content year round on this channel. Let me know down in the comments whether you agree or disagree on any of these rankings, but either way, we'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.